Hello and welcome to The Mint, and welcome to our exclusive coverage of Zimbabwe's 2024 National Budget presentation. I'm Andy Hodges, and you're watching ZTM Prime, broadcasting to you from our studios here in Harare, Zimbabwe. It's Budget Day. Hello and welcome to The Mint, and welcome to our exclusive coverage of Zimbabwe's 2024 National Budget presentation. I'm Andy Hodges, and you're watching ZTM Prime, broadcasting to you from our studios here in Harare, Zimbabwe. It's Budget Day. Zimbabwe's Finance Minister, Professor Ntuli Ncube, will this afternoon present Zimbabwe's 2024 budget for debate and adoption by Zimbabwe's parliament. So the question is, which sector is going to get the biggest chunk of the money? Will it be health? Will it be education? What about social welfare? Are citizens going to get some relief? More money in their pockets, so to speak? How much will be spent on the most vulnerable in our society? Will women, youth and people with disabilities be adequately covered? Will the budget be pro-poor, pro-people? And as per the theme of the budget, will it consolidate Zimbabwe's economic transformation? Now, today in our exclusive Budget 2024 coverage, we begin with a pre-budget discussion, then cross over to Parliament in Mount Hamden for the Minister's presentation. That should be at around 3 p.m. this afternoon, and then followed by a post-budget discussion here at ZTN Studios with our experts. We will, during that time, of course, cross over to Iwan Mabunda, who is based at the moment in Mount Hamden in the field. We'll be getting some interviews directly from parliamentarians and possibly the Finance Minister himself. All right. Let's recap. Now, how better to do this than look at the 2023 National Budget highlights? Now, the 2023 budget was proposed at 4.5 trillion Zimbabwe dollars. Now, that seemed like a huge amount at the time, but listen to this number. 2024, Minister Ncube has hinted on a 44 trillion Zimbabwe dollar budget. That's almost 10 times the 2023 budget. Now, bear in mind that ministries actually asked for 110 trillion, so they're not getting all they want. But I tell you what, 44 trillion is a lot of money by whatever standards you look at.
Oh, if you recall, when we budgeted last year, for the 2023 budget, and then we come into 2023, what was the exchange rate? The exchange rate was about what, 900?
900, yeah.
Just below 1,000. Yeah. Now, currently the exchange rate is above 5,000. So clearly you can see the impact of the exchange system already. Unfortunately, you cannot say I'm lowering inflation. Inflation lowers itself through the policies that you implement. And we've worked very hard to those policies, and inflation is coming down.
Now, that really does show, though, the 4.5 to 44 trillion. It shows the effects of Zimbabwe. Opened in January at around the rate of about 785 against the United States dollar on the official market, and about 1,200 on the parallel market. And then it then had a dramatic plunge. You can see there from the graph that plunged dramatically in June, trading at 5,739 on the official market and 7,900 on the parallel markets, respectively. You can see that remained stable August, September, October, and November, and then taking a slight depreciation coming into November, where it's now currently trading at 5,774 to one greenback on the official market and 8,900 on the parallel market. Now, this huge increase in the budget for 2024 highlights again how important it is that the policy stance, ensuring constraint, for example, on things like money supply. We ensure money supply is kept tight. Of course, that is critical in terms of making sure that, in a way, you can call it starving the market of Zimbabwe dollars, so we can squeeze the power
A volatile inflation environment. It's difficult for companies to plan. We slow down investment, we end up slowing down growth, and we even impact income distribution. Yeah.
Let's look at the allocations for 2023. What was the largest item in the 2023 budget? I'm sure you guessed it. It was salaries and wages. Look, the public see there, 52.4% was going to public services, wages and salaries. That was a tight number actually for the Minister of Finance to keep last year. It was touch and go, particularly in the back of exchange rate movements and inflationary pressures. Now then, let's look at the other line items, the other sectors or the other ministries that got big allocations. Of course, education got the second highest, 14.02%. And I'm sure no one can complain about that. Of course, children, education, the future of Zimbabwe, it's a fact. After that, of course, it comes to health. It's very important to ensure that we have a healthy population. Defense 7.3%, and all the rest of them 6.96%. So as you can see, it's important that you can see where the money is going. And I get the feeling that if you look at that pie chart there, I think that the allocations in the 2024 budget will pretty much follow that 2023 template there. Now, health. I want to talk about health. It's still a sector that breeds vibrant discussion in communities around Zimbabwe. Conversations around what some may call the exorbitant and unaffordable cost of drugs, alleged lack of hospital equipment, lack of specialist equipment like, for example, MRI machines. Questions like, are there enough hospitals and clinics in determine how much money goes to health and education? Well, first of all, the Abuja Declaration that recommends that 15% of the budget be allocated towards health matters, and the Dakar Declaration that states that 20% of the budget must go towards education. I believe the minister will probably stick to those guidelines. And should. The 2021, 2022 and 2023 budgets were fashioned as pro-poor. Looking at the comparison of budget allocation for social sectors in 2021, 2022 and 2023, did they offer safety nets to the most vulnerable and lower income earners? That's an important question because the budget is there to look after the vulnerable citizens in Zimbabwe. The minister made it clear in an interview that we had with him earlier this week. He said, look, Andy, the fact is this, we're here to put in place the enabling economic environment for every citizen's standard of living to increase. But really, our interventions when it comes to social welfare protection should be for the most vulnerable. He was talking about the beam, for example. Even Fumvudza is a social welfare protection scheme to feed people, to make people food self-sufficient. That gets me to my next point. Citizens, you and me, what should we expect in today's 2024 national budget?
This budget is meant to leave no one behind. Everyone should expect something from this budget.
That's an interesting question. Well, look, it's time to take a breather. Now, after the break and over the course of the afternoon, I will be joined by Tatenda Nyachega, CEO Africa Roundtable Representative Esther Mapungwana, she's Zimbabwe Women's Resource Center and Network ZWRCN, Sikomborero Sibanda from the Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development, ZIMCOD, Marvin Chizonga, investment analyst, Prosper Chitambara, an economist. They'll be here for both our pre-budget and post-budget discussions. Of course, remember, we're going to be crossing over live to Parliament around 3 p.m. this afternoon. As soon as the minister gets there, you'll be able to watch his full budget presentation speech here live on ZTM Prime. The minister has to balance. He has to balance the fact that he needs to look after the most vulnerable in society. He needs to make sure he puts enough money into health, education, and infrastructure. Of course, let's not forget about our security services. They are required. We need to have security. Peace and security actually creates a strong, vibrant economy. How will he balance it? Will he be able to put money in your pocket, or will he put a big hole in it? Well, don't go away. After the break, I'll be joined by my panel But as we start our discussions, our pre-budget discussions, Budget 2024, right here on ZTM Prime. Don't go away, The Mint. We'll be right back.
Christmas is here in all Bon Marché stores. We have the best selection of all your grocery needs and occasions this Christmas. Get your 1 kg Farmer J's drumsticks for $4.50. Omo Auto Washing Powder 2 kg $8. Glazed Christmas ham 100 grams for 50 cents. Heineken Lager Silver NRB 330 ml for just $1.50. KWV Classic Chenin Blanc 750 ml for just $8. Christmas is here. Bon Marché. Simply good.
Well, welcome back. You're watching The Mint. And of course, this is our 2024 National Budget special right here on ZTM Prime. Of course, right now, everything is happening in Mount Hamden, just a short distance away from us here in the capital, Harare. Of course, I'm Andy Hodges, as you know, and I'll be with you with my guests all afternoon as we analyze, look at Zimbabwe Women's Resource Center Network, ZWRCN. I've also got Zikombo Sibanda, of course, a usual contributor here on The Mint from the Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development, and Marvin Chidzonga, an investment analyst. We will be joined later by Prosper Chitambawa and Tate. I think the budget may be a bit early, so maybe crossing over to Parliament just now, but very quickly, expectations. 2024, we know what happened in 2023. What happened? What do you think is going to happen in 2024 budget? Just some highlights for you, very briefly.
I think, you know what, we are approaching festive season. Everybody would expect maybe the minister to be our Santa Claus, but unfortunately, which is maybe scarce financial resources, which cannot be stretched beyond a certain level.
He says 18% is his cap. Yeah. Over that, he hasn't got the money.
Of course. So if you look at the expectations from line ministries in terms of maybe the allocations, definitely there's always going to be a gap at any time. And in this case, we are looking at about $107 trillion being expected from a lot of the stakeholders from within our country, against maybe the now, which is sort of probably half of what he can allocate. So from that end, you can imagine that, look, expectations already have not been met.
Right, it's a balancing act, Esther. What do you see in this budget? Let's look at women, youth in particular, people with disabilities. Just to have, what do you think you'll see? Because
actually distributed to vulnerable people, including women, children, and people living with disabilities. But our main thrust is that the budget should always be gender responsive, not only women empowerment, but it understands the issues that people are actually facing in the country.
I think now they move to gender, hopefully they're moving to gender budgeting. That should also help. But the fact is this, and I did say this to the minister, and we've said it to social welfare as well. We've said your money is in model. Zico, welcome as usual. What do you see happening? I mean, I know from your economics, I know debt is one of your major issues there at Zimcod.
Yeah, you know, like I'm looking at the budget envelope, and I'm seeing that the budget is in trillions, and then I'm seeing trying to say how I want to figure out how the minister is going to address issues to do with exchange rate stability, given that we are actually having an outlook, 2024 outlook, which is all these things. I want to see how the minister is going to address tax relief. At the same time, we are facing, like, I mean, the resource is going down, but also poverty is rising. Yeah. So I have a lot to...
Well, it's a balancing act. Right? The minister will have to give up that money. He can't give it up. And it's the only way that we, in fact, one of the things that I'm going to be looking for, to be frank, in this budget, is he said he's going to put in measures to try and formalize the informal. That's interesting. I think he's going to do it through the tax. Anyway, let's on. But let's go straight into the House. The Speaker of the House is speaking now. Let's cross over. It'll be interesting to see what's going to happen. So, this IMMT, as I was saying about, it's numbers are terrible. 20% of us pay taxes, 80% don't. Molly?
Well, yeah, to some extent you can say that, but also we, being a cash economy, the revenue sources for the government, not just the taxes themselves, but also other sources. If you look at other governments the world over, they do not just rely on taxes for their financing or for their revenue. You have other governments, like even especially China, they have a lot of offshore assets. When if you look at even the creation of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, in as much as some people may attack it, but it goes a long way in smoothing.
I think we noted, and I think me and Vikomo have spoken about this before, in the 2023 and 2022 budget, is the minister putting aside supposedly money for things like the Women's Bank, okay, but didn't capitalize it, for example. Okay, so again, I don't know if the word is confused, but what system? We need to put in place a system whereby if he puts money for the women, they must be able to get it. And the money that's there, one of the complaints I get is people go and access the money and they
is more on the capital side. We are looking at collateral. So for women who are actually vulnerable, they won't have the collateral to access the money. So at the economy of the people in the economy in the informal sector, and the minister is trying to get taxes from but the issue is not really about just getting the taxes, it's about what is the money going to do. Just about getting the money, it's about the results that are coming out. If you really put out the results, because yes, people in the first world, they actually pay taxes, but they see the results of their money and they're incentivized to pay. And we're not saying that they should pay a lot of money, but some substance, and then they see the produce. So it's about the balance of what are you producing out there, what are you showing that really the people's money is working.
Address. And I think one of the ways of addressing that is bringing the private sector more into agricultural production rather than government. Obviously, from Woods is meant to make sure people are food self-sufficient and much more helping the rural people to get a huge chunk of agricultural financing has got to get off our budget. It has to, because we can't carry it every year in and year out, particularly when you have expenses like infrastructure and so forth.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I think the Treasury is trying to address that. Look, on the structured dialogue platform with our creditors, they've identified 3 thematic areas for reforms, and one of it is land tenure systems. I think we really need to address our land tenure system so that maybe farmers can have, for instance, bankable 99 years.
I'll come back to you right now. Parliament building in Mount Hamden. Everything is set there. We have our guest in studio. We're discussing the pre-budget. What do they expect to see? We, of course, have to take a quick breather. We'll be joining you straight after the break. But hang on, because any second we may cross over to Parliament to hear the Minister of Finance speak. Don't go away. The Mint. We'll be right back.
Christmas is here. Buy bulk and save this Christmas at OK Mart. Get your 10 by 2 kg Azam self-raising flour for just $19.80. 6 by 1 liter life 60 cents per kg. 10 kg pocket of potatoes for just $7.90 each. 6 by 1.25 liter Nyati sorghum beer for just $4. Christmas is here. Kisimusi yashika. Ikisimusi isifikile. Okay, Mart, my happy place. Christmas is here in all Bon Marché stores. We have the best selection of all your grocery needs and occasions this Christmas. Get your 1 kg Farmer J's drumsticks for $4.50. Omo auto washing powder 2 kg $8. Glazed Christmas ham 1 750 mils for just $8. Christmas is here. Bon Marché. Simply good. The season of happiness is upon Surf washing powder at $4.10. 8-inch Christmas fruitcake for just $28. 1.25 liter chibuku for just 95 cents. Christmas is here. Kisimusi yashika.
Welcome back. You're watching ZTM Prime, and of course, this is our exclusive 2024 national budget presentation that's been held at the Parliament of Zimbabwe in Mount Hamden, and of course, being presented to Parliament by Zimbabwe's Minister of Finance, Professor Mthuli Ncube. Everybody is there. Things are ready to go. We want to know what is going to be in the budget. What will be in it for you and me? What will be in it for the most of pro-poor. But I'm going to ask Esther about that because everyone keeps saying pro-poor, pro-poor. I'm going to explain what that actually means. So we were talking earlier before the breather. Please continue with your thoughts, but also can you throw in the issue of debt? When I spoke to the minister, he said, all I'm going to do is reiterate that we're going to pay our debt back. Okay? But he's not going to put any money towards it.
Okay, I was actually addressing the issue to do with the agri sector when I was saying I think the treasury or government is actually taking the right course. Like they're engaging right now with creditors, and they've identified some key reform areas, and one of it being the issues of to do with land tenure systems. And I think this will address, ensure that farmers, our farmers here, actually if we address the land tenure system so that we have 99-year leases so that farmers can access credit from banks. And then also have to address issues. I think we've done land audits before because there's some multiple farms, people owning multiple which are who are actually being now trapped in drug abuse, etc. So I think if we can identify those pieces of land and distribute to the youth and
well,
the women.
There was one good thing, Esther, that he, well, not one, lots of them, but the one thing that he said concerning drugs, he said that in the budget they will put money in for rehabilitation centers all across Zimbabwe, which is great. But I think it's a huge chunk of the money. On the other side, citizens are complaining that they can't afford drugs. There's no equipment when they go into hospitals. So the infrastructure side appears to be decaying, if I can call it that. But they're getting a huge chunk of money again. Most of that money is going on salaries and wages, as you do. Our doctors and nurses, thank you for your service and looking after us. But what do you think about it? It's a problem, this drug cost.
Yes, I think the issue is our structure, the way we are actually. When it's allocated, it's mostly going to, like you say, to the administration. I think the administration costs about 37 or 35%, and the drugs and infrastructure and medical supplies about 18%. Yet that is where the money is supposed to go. Versus if you look at some of the money that comes maybe from out of pocket or from donors, will go to the drugs. So I think there's need for a realignment in terms of how the budget is actually allocated, as well as the timing of the allocation of the budget. It's really important because at the end of the day, you might say we've given you money, but how is it being distributed? And the important thing is how we're going to monitor it. And when we're going to the issue, we're talking about the youth and the drugs, it's not just about just having the rehabilitation centers, it's about how are people going to access it.
But we're going to have to just take a quick breather, Steph, but thank you for that. We'll hold that thought. We'll come back to you. And Marvin, I want to come back to you about Zimbabwe's national budget happening at the Parliament building in Mount Hamden. You, of course, are watching The Mint, and this is ZTM Prime. Don't go away. We will be right back.
The season of happiness is upon us at OK Store. $4.10. 8-inch Christmas fruitcake for just $28. 1.25-liter chibuku for just 95 cents. Christmas is here. Kisimusi yashika. Ikisimusi isifikile. Okay, my happy place. Christmas is here in all Bon Marché stores. We have the best selection of all your grocery needs and Christmas ham 100 grams for 50 cents. Heineken Lager Silver NRB 330 ml for just $1.50. KWV Classic Chenin Blanc 750 ml for just $8. Christmas is here. Bon Marché. Simply good. Just $19.80. 6x1 liter Life UHT milk for just $7.30. 25 by 750 ml Sunlight dishwashing liquid for just $79.50. Bulk Super 4-quarter for just $5.60 per kg. 10 kg pocket of potatoes for just $7.90 each. 6 by 1.25 liter Nyati Sorghum beer for just $4. Christmas is here. Kisimusi yashika. Ikisimusi isifikile. Okay. $1 liter Denderi Citro for just 90 cents. 2 kg Surf washing powder, $4.10. 8-inch Christmas fruitcake for just $28. 1.25 liter Chibuku for just 95 cents. Christmas is here. Kisimusi yashika. Ikisimusi isifikile. Okay, my happy place.
Presentation coverage coming from the Parliament of Zimbabwe and Mount Hamden, and that will be done by the Minister of Finance, Professor Ngube. Now, we're now joined by Eben Mabunda. Eben Mabunda is ZTM reporter. Of course, he's based there at, he's based right now at Parliament. Eben, good afternoon. Look, I don't know. Expectations there. What are you seeing? Are you finding, what are the members of Parliament coming in? What do they think they're hoping to see? What are they believing the minister should get money on? Okay, we're still getting him there, as you can imagine. Right, gents. Anyway, I'm now joined by Tatenda Nyachega, CEO of Africa Roundtable, and Prosper Chitamba, an economist. We will get to Eben now. We're just trying to connect with him. Gentlemen, welcome. Now, obviously, you know the numbers. You heard the numbers in terms of 2023. And security services. What? Tatenda, I can't see the mix changing. You know what I'm saying? He may throw different money at different things, but I cannot see salaries and wages, education, health, and agriculture not being the top money. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Tell me.
Thank you, Indy. I think when I look at this budget, the 2024 national budget, I've been asked it on my way to this the question, what do you see? My response was, it's just the same old wine but coming in a new bottle.
Okay.
So we are not going to expect anything new.
But maybe the wine tasted nice, right?
And you expect a tight monetary policy, a tight fiscal policy, and in our case, it's all about balancing it.
And even lower growth rates. I mean, they're talking, what, 3.6%, we're now at 5.9%, and that's a global phenomenon. It's not an issue.
Sure. So that's the expectation. So it's all about how he's going to balance it. But we are not expecting much new aspects from this 2024 national budget.
Okay, so you've dampened your expectations, if I can call it that. Prosper, everyone keeps saying pro-poor, pro-people, okay? And I always ask the minister this, define what pro-poor is. His argument is that if they put a lot of money into social services, it will be the most vulnerable. If they put money into education, okay, and the BEAM program, so they put money into health, where you can access free health, or at least as much of it as health, that is pro-poor. That is supporting the most vulnerable, okay? And it looks like that is where the money is going. However, we also need to balance between a budget, because he talks about consolidating economic transformation. So money must be going to do that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I agree with the minister. It's basically about ensuring that resources are put into those sectors that enhance the productivity and the well-being of the citizens. I was reading how they are doing the budget process in New Zealand, and they are moving away from just focusing on growth, but also focusing importantly on metrics to measure human welfare or human well-being, changes in human well-being. So when we talk about pro-poor, you're actually putting money towards more resources, obviously, towards health, towards education, social protection. You mentioned BEAM. I think those are critical, given the challenge that we have with the high levels of extreme poverty.
But Prost, don't forget devolution. I'm coming to you, Marvin. This issue of putting resources into infrastructure. In fact, Marvin, you can comment on this. I'm worried. I'm concerned, Prosper, because we're funding it from the current expenditure. We're not funding it, and you cannot fund infrastructure through the current. You need long-term financing. But I don't have a problem. I mean, I understand we have to, which means that we have to build hospitals. I think the goal was within 10 kilometers of an individual. You should have a hospital.
Or at least 5 kilometers.
5 kilometers. Oh, wow. Okay. There's even more hospitals now. Schools, of course, are required. Forgetting about, obviously, energy. Okay, we haven't even gone into some of the other issues, right? So it's a worry. We need the infrastructure. There's no doubt it's the economic benefits. But we need to find a way of financing it outside the budgeting.
But the current model has not been very sustainable, overly relying on government, public financing. You'd need, obviously, very long-term patient capital, and you'd need to rope in the private sector. In South Africa, they've been able to leverage the public-private partnership.
All right, I'm still coming. Don't worry, Marvin. Devolution. Right, we're now joined by Eben Mabunda, right there at Parliament Building in Mount Hampden. Eben, I know you've been out there waiting patiently. What's the mood like? What are the members of Parliament, senators who are coming in? What are the expectations? What do they want to hear from the Minister of Finance for the budget 2024?
Good afternoon, Andy. Quite an aura of expectations. This
Hi, Eben. Yeah, we seem to be having. We'll try and clean up the sound. Eben, can you hear me? Eben?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Right. So I was explaining the
atmosphere and the environment of expectation right here at the new Parliament building in Mount Hampton. We first of all saw members of Parliament trickling in from about 1:30 or so, and then we also saw some ministers coming through, some notable faces, and of course they have been coming through to make sure that they are in for the most important, should I say, second most important policy document, of course, after the State of the Nation address. And we have seen representatives from both the opposition as well as also the ruling party, ZANU-PF. And then we saw also the coming in of the Minister of Finance, Economic Development and Investment Promotion, who is, of course, the key man here, entrusted with the responsibility of delivering the 2024 fiscus. And then after that, we saw the coming in of Deputy President, Honorable retired Colonel Kemba Mohadi. After that, His Excellency the President, Comrade Dr. Edi Mnangagwa, coming through, of course, for the budget, and also together with him was the Deputy President, Honorable Dr. Retired, of course, Constantino Chiwenga, coming through as well. And so what you get is that atmosphere of expectation in terms of what the fiscus will be tabled, or how it will be tabled. And of course, some of the key issues that we are looking forward to are the issues of macroeconomic stability. We saw the Zimbabwe dollar depreciate by over 87% during the course of 2023 alone, of course, against the United States dollar, and inflation that is continued to rage on in 2023. Beyond that, there are expectations in terms of what will be the key priority areas for the Minister of Finance. Of course, he is empowered by the Public Finance and Management Act in terms of deciding how the finances of the state are actually articulated across the country. In the 2023 budget, of course, we saw the Ministry of Defense receiving 7% of that particular budget. We also witnessed the Ministry of Health receiving 11% of the budget. Education, about 14% of the 2023 national fiscal. And so it remains to be seen what will be the key priority areas for the minister in as far as 2024 is actually concerned. And so these are some of the issues that you can look for to being articulated. Also of interest to the public is the issue of taxes, as well as also the tax bans that are associated with that, because given how it is that inflation is pinching at the disposable income of citizens, expectations are high in terms of what or how the minister will articulate these issues. But of course, Andy, if you recall in your exclusive conversation with the minister, he said that we can expect to see more money in the hands of
Ngube. Looks like he's just about to start his budget presentation. Now, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Of course, we need to see where he will allocate the priorities. This is the government's financial plan for the next year. Let's cross over to Parliament, the Minister of Finance of Zimbabwe.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I move that leave be granted to present a statement of the estimated revenues and expenditures of the Republic of Zimbabwe for the 2024 financial year and make provisions for matters ancillary and incidental to this purpose. This is in compliance with Section 103, subsection 1 of the Constitution, as read with Section 7, subsection 2A of the Public Finance Management General Regulations of 2019. As an introduction, Mr. Speaker, sir, this being the first budget following conclusion of the August 2023 harmonized elections, allow me to congratulate His Excellency the President, Dr. Edi Mnangagwa, and all honorable members who were re-elected and those serving for the first time in this august House. I look forward to working closely with all of you as we implement the National Development Strategy 1, NDS 1, which seeks to achieve the country's vision of becoming an upper middle income society by year 2030. Let me take this opportunity to thank His Excellency the President, Dr. E.D. Mnangagwa, for his wise counsel and support during the formulation of this budget. Credit also goes to the two Vice President, Honorable General Retired Dr. C.G.D.N. Chiwenga and Honorable Colonel Retired K.C.D. Mohadi, as well as fellow cabinet ministers for their inputs and suggestions. The President's people-centered development philosophy, Nika, inowakwa, ikotongwa, igonamatigwa, nevenevayo. Ilizwe lakhiwa, liwuswe, likhulekelwe ngabanikazi balo. This philosophy enjoins all levels of government and citizens to provide new impetus to the country's transformation agenda of enhancing production and productivity across all sectors of the economy in order to build a stronger economy and a fairer society where peace, security, and leaving no one and no place behind. Mr. Speaker said, consolidating economic transformation. The proposals and suggestions from consultations with parliamentarians, the various ministries, we call them MDAs and departments, business, labor, academia, civil society, youth, women, small-scale enterprises, and miners, among others, largely informed the priorities outlined in this budget statement. Mr. Speaker, sir, before turning to specific interventions, allow me to put the 2024 national budget in the context of both the global and domestic economic environment. Let me begin with the global economic outlook. The global economy is expected to continue to recover, but unevenly, from the negative impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the cost of living crisis. The unprecedented tightening of global monetary conditions in response to decades high inflation levels has slowed the pace of global economic recovery. Consequently, the International Monetary Fund and through its World Economic Outlook, they focus in October 2023 that global growth will slow down from 3.5% in 2022 to 3% this year, 2023, and then down to 2.9% in 2024. Mr. Speaker said there should be slides on the walls. I see there's a big slide indeed. I'm sure members could follow some of those figures there. Growth in the sub-Saharan Africa region is projected at 3.3% in 2023, and it will pick up to 4% in 2024, mainly driven by strong performance in non-resource intensive countries. The real GDP growth rate of the Southern African Development Community SADC is projected to decelerate to 1.6% in 2023 from 2.7% in 2022 before recovering to above 2.7% in 2024. A few words about global inflation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, declining international commodity prices, monetary policy tightening have hampered headline inflation during 2023. In that regard, global headline inflation is projected to decelerate to 4.8% in 2024 on a year-on-year basis. This is from as high as 8.7% and 5.9% in 2022 and 2023, respectively. In terms of commodity prices, the outlook period commodity prices in the outlook period, commodity prices are expected to remain broadly unchanged over the remainder of 2023 and into 2024 amid improved supply prospects and weakening global demand. There should be again a table showing the trend in commodity price indices. You can see they're basically flat to downwards. Maybe except for gold, those of you who have been investing in gold of late. On the domestic economy, Mr. Speaker said, the domestic economy is now projected to grow at 5.5% in 2023, a slight upward revision from the August projection of 5.3%. This is on account of a better than expected output in agriculture, particularly tobacco, wheat, and cotton. However, economic growth is expected to slow down to 3.5% in 2024, mainly owing to the anticipated impact of the El Nino phenomenon being forecasted for the 2023-2024 summer cropping season on agricultural output, as well as declining mineral commodity prices attributable to the global economic slowdown. Mr. Speaker said the 2024 GDP projections are underpinned by the following broad assumptions. One, normal to below normal rainfall season due to the El Nino effect. Two, a slowdown in global economic growth amid geopolitical tensions as well. Three, declining international commodity prices. Four, continued use of the current multi-currency regime. And five, tight fiscal and tight monetary policies. This slide 7 and 8, my notes here, it will show up there to basically show what's going on there in terms of these assumptions. Mr. Speaker said, let me turn to the balance of payments position. Mr. Speaker said, merchandise exports stood at $5.2 billion during the first 9 months of the year and are projected to increase by 4.3% to $7.3 billion by year end. And this is compared to $7 billion in 2022. And this is on account of higher tobacco, lithium, and diamond exports. In 2024, despite the softening of commodity prices of key minerals such as gold and PGMs, exports are projected to remain on the increase, sustained by growth in output from lithium, coke, tobacco, and the increase will be to $7.7 billion US dollars. Then now turn to imports. Merchandise imports registered a 4.7% increase. This is from $6 billion in the first 9 months of 2022 to $6.3 billion in the same period in 2023. This was driven by growth in fuel, machinery, and electricity imports. To year end, merchandise imports are projected at $8.5 billion, which is a 4.9% growth, up from $8.1 billion recorded in 2022. Imports are projected to further increase to $9 billion US dollars in 2024 on account of higher imports of grain, of energy, raw materials, and machinery imports. Up there is a chart showing the growth in our imports, the trend going as far back as 2018, and we can see that steady growth. Only a growing economy can register that level of import growth trend. Remittances are projected to continue during the current account. Let me retake that. Remittances are projected to continue driving the current account surplus and are projected to close the year 2023 at $2.1 billion US dollars, before rising further to $2.2 billion US dollars in 2024. The current account is expected to close the year 2023 in a surplus position of $244.4 billion US dollars, so $244 million US dollars, slightly lower than the $305 million US dollars registered in 2022. In 2024, the current account surplus is projected to narrow somewhat to 204.5 million US dollars, reflecting a wider trade deficit as imports accelerate at a faster pace than exports. Let me turn to domestic inflation. Mr. Speaker said, domestic prices have relatively been stable since the third quarter of the year, as reflected by a month-on-month inflation level which declined from 12.1% in June 2023 down to 4.5% in November 2023. Concomitantly, the annual headline inflation declined from 30.9% in June 2023 to 21.6% in June 2023. In the outlook, annual inflation is expected to remain relatively stable and is projected to end the year 2023 slightly below 20%. In 2024, annual inflation is anticipated to end the year between 10 to 20%, reflecting continued tight monetary and fiscal policies. A statement about the exchange rate. Mr. Speaker said, the introduction of the wholesale foreign exchange auction on the back of the recent liberalization of the exchange rate saw the power market premium declining from a peak of over 140% in May 2023 to around 20% in October 2023. A few comments about monetary developments. Growth in both reserve money, we call it M0 in economistic language, and broad money, M3, has significantly slowed down, having peaked in June 2023. The reserve money and broad money annual growth declined from about 3,000% and 1,100% in June 2023 to 1,400% and then 719% in September 2023, respectively. The decline in monetary aggregates was largely due to the combined effect of tight monetary policy and prudent fiscal policy measures. Mr. Speaker said, the financial sector has remained sound and stable, with strong capital and liquidity positions, as well as strong risk management practices. This is evidenced by sound financial indicators such as the capital adequacy and liquidity ratios and the level of non-performing loans. Let me turn to the public finance developments, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, revenue collections for the period January to September 2023 amounted to 11.4 trillion Zimbabwe dollars against expenditures of 12.3 trillion Zimbabwe dollars, resulting in a budget deficit of 0.9 trillion Zimbabwe dollars. There should be a slide to show the numbers on the screen. To year end, revenue collections are projected at 21.2 trillion against projected expenditures of 22.6 trillion, comprising compensation of employees at about 10.9 trillion, the use of goods and services at 4.7 trillion, and then capital expenditure at 4 trillion. During the first 9 months, the fiscal deficit stood at 0.9 trillion and is projected to end the year at 1.4 trillion. This is 1.2% of GDP, which should be financed through domestic and external borrowing, and that's what we've been doing. A statement on public debt, Mr. Speaker, sir. The total public and publicly guaranteed debt stock at the end of September 2023 amounted to 17.7 billion US dollars, of which external debt amounted to 12.7 billion US dollars, and domestic debt is at 5 billion US dollars equivalent. Let me turn to the macroeconomic fiscal framework for 2024, which is basically driving our projection as well as revenue forecast. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, in line with the projected economic growth of 3.5%, total revenue collections in 2024 are estimated at 53.9 trillion Zimbabwe dollars, which is 18.3% of GDP. And this is an increase from the current ratio of about 17.8% of GDP. And this is broken down into 51.2 trillion in terms of tax revenue, and then 2.7 trillion in non-tax revenue. Guided by the expected revenue envelope and the desired fiscal path, expenditures in 2024 are projected at 58.2 trillion or 19.8% of GDP. The proposed expenditures take into account the following. One, the need to maintain the purchasing power of civil service salaries. Two, ensuring provision of core social services that benefit the poor. Three, sustaining maintenance and rehabilitation of government infrastructure. Four, prioritize support to ongoing public infrastructure projects. Five, non-accumulation of arrears. And finally, six, an increase in the funding of infrastructure projects through public-private partnerships, otherwise known as PPPs. The total budget financing gap amounts to 9.2 trillion Zimbabwe dollars, comprising a budget deficit of 4.3 trillion Zimbabwe dollars, or 1.5% of GDP, and amortization of loans and maturing government securities estimated at 4.9 trillion Zimbabwe dollars. The deficit will be financed through domestic and external borrowing. Mr. Speaker, sir, I now turn to the proposed vote allocations. Mr. Speaker, sir, during the formulation process of the 2024 national budget, the various ministries, departments, or MDAs submitted funding requirements, which we call bids, of over 110 trillion Zimbabwe dollars. This is against the available envelope of only 58.2 trillion Zimbabwe dollars. The envelope is limited by the sustainable revenue to GDP ratio of about 18%, which has been allocated to the various ministries, the MDAs, and is indicated. There is a table on the screen, but I'll go through each vote in a minute, one by one. But maybe let me delve into the budget priorities and then delve into the vote allocations. Mr. Speaker, sir, the priority areas of the 2024 national budget have largely benefited from the NDS one midterm review, as well as input from various stakeholders. A key priority of this 2024 budget is on economic growth and macroeconomic stability. The fiscal policy 2024 national budget is guided by the need to maintain a sustainable budget deficit within the SADC macroeconomic convergence threshold of not more than 3% of GDP. Going into 2024, government seeks to consolidate and entrench the stability to facilitate economic transformation and preserve disposable incomes. Fiscal restraint and tight monetary policy, together with a healthy current account position, provides the necessary conditions for currency and price stability. Specifically, the central bank, our Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, will target a month-on-month inflation of less than 3% throughout 2024. Let me turn to civil service remuneration, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, as part of the remuneration review process for civil servants, government will convert the current COVID-19 and cushioning allowances, which aggregates to $300 a month. This will now be part of the pensionable emoluments across the board. And this is effective January 2024. Let me transition to the productive sectors and the ministries that support those sectors, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, starting with agriculture, the country has achieved national food security through its agriculture support model. Going forward into 2024, the thrust is on consolidating the gains achieved so far. In this regard, 4.3 trillion Zimbabwe dollars is being allocated to to the Minister of Lands, Agriculture, Fisheries, Water and Rural Development to spearhead the implementation of agriculture and food systems transformation strategy. A footnote, Mr. Speaker, said we are chasing the target of the Maputo, Maputo target, which says that the budget for the agricultural sector should not be less than 10% of the total budget. And we have tried to really get there at 4.3 trillion Zimbabwe dollars allocation to the ministry. A few words about the manufacturing sector. Mr. Speaker, say in 2024 the sector is projected to grow by 1.6%, whilst capacity utilization is expected to average 60% on account of expected price and exchange rate stability, improvement in electricity supply, as well as increased usage of the local currency. There's a chart on the screen showing the capacity utilization currently at about 60% for the sector. To sustain the gains recorded so far in the manufacturing sector, an amount of 130.5 billion Zimbabwe dollars is being allocated to the Ministry of Industry and Commerce to support development and implementation of industrial policy and the retooling of the industry. Let me turn to the mining sector. Mr. Speaker, government will continue to support the mining sector to ensure sustainable growth of the sector, projected at 7.6% in 2024, driven by ongoing investment in the PGMs, group of metals, in gold, in coal, in lithium, among others. There's a chart showing the growth in that sector on the wall. In this regard, an amount of 132.7 billion Zimbabwe dollars is being proposed as an allocation to the Ministry of Mines and Mining Development to implement the legislative and administrative reforms that provides a conducive environment for mining and beneficiation. Let me turn to tourism. Mr. Speaker, the tourism industry is expected to continue on a growth path driven by domestic, regional, and international tourist arrivals. To support the operations of the Ministry of Tourism and Hospitality, an amount of 71.1 billion Zimbabwe dollars has been allocated to spearhead tourism development in the country, as well as marketing the country as a destination of choice. I now turn to climate issues. The government recognizes the importance of conserving our environment through combating the unsustainable exploitation of our natural resources, addressing climate change impacts, as well as wildlife conservation. Hence, an amount of 135.5 billion Zimbabwe dollars is being proposed as an allocation to the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Wildlife. Let me turn to the cluster of infrastructure, ICT, and the digital economy. Mr. Speaker, one of our own in our profession, Larry Summers, who is a well-known economist, once said that expenditure on infrastructure is an investment in the long-term productivity and competitiveness of an economy. Therefore, outlays towards the sector seek to re-establish functional infrastructure services by improving the quantity, quality, and access in order to improve the country's investment climate, reduce the cost of doing business, as well as enable citizens to engage in socio-economic activities. The government will expand and modernize funding models that broaden the investor base in flexible and innovative ways, such as asset recycling and the use of public-private partnerships, PPPs. Overall support for infrastructure, including devolution during 2024, amounts to 10 trillion Zimbabwe dollars, comprising fiscal support of 8.1 trillion Zimbabwe dollars, complemented by statutory and other resources of 1.4 trillion, development partner support at 189.9 billion, as well as loans amounting to about 322.2 billion Zimbabwe dollars. A comment on transport, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, improvements in our transport systems remain critical given the need to enhance connectivity and access, including the promotion of regional and international trade. In this regard, 1.22 trillion Zimbabwe dollars has been allocated to the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure Development to facilitate the rehabilitation and construction of transport infrastructure such as roads, ports of entry, airports, as well as to facilitate the turnaround of the National Railways of Zimbabwe, NRZ. Coming to energy, Mr. Speaker, sir, the Ministry of Energy and Power Development has been allocated 90.1 billion Zimbabwe dollars to facilitate investments in energy generation, enhancing the transmission and distribution network, as well as sustaining the rural electrification program. On the digital economy, consistent with our NDS-1 objective of attaining a digitally enabled economy, the budget will support interventions that harness and promote the use of ICT services across the whole spectrum of the economy. In this regard, an amount of 185.3 billion Zimbabwe dollars has been allocated to the Ministry of Information, Communication Technology, Postal Services, and Courier Services. Let me turn to housing, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I recall the former IMF chief and the current president of the European Central Bank, Madame Christine Lagarde, saying that housing is not just a basic need. It is an essential component of a vibrant and inclusive economy. Government will work closely with the private sector and other stakeholders to put in place appropriate packages and incentives that allow for enhanced financing and implementation of targeted housing delivery projects. An amount of 353 billion Zimbabwe dollars has been allocated to the Ministry of National Housing and Social Amenities to facilitate construction of houses to the general public, civil servants, as well as institutional accommodation. Let me turn to water and sanitation. Mr. Speaker, sir, the 2024 national budget has set aside 608.3 billion towards the following strategic priorities in the water and sanitation sector. The rehabilitation and maintenance of existing water and sanitation infrastructure. 2, the construction of additional water bodies targeting completion of ongoing dam projects. 3, capacitation of local authorities like ZINWA and other agencies involved in water resource management. And 4, improving access to water and sanitation services in the rural areas through drilling of boreholes and the construction and rehabilitation of water supply schemes. Turning to youth, sports, arts and culture, Mr. Speaker, sir, an amount of 210.2 billion Zimbabwe dollars has been set aside for the Ministry of Youth Empowerment, Development and Vocational Training to support youth development and empowerment programs, refurbishment and retooling of vocational training centers, as well as combating of drug and substance abuse. In addition, the Ministry of Sport, Recreation, Arts and Culture has been allocated 136.2 billion Zimbabwe dollars to spearhead the development of the sports, recreation and cultural activities, including rehabilitation of major stadiums. I now turn to the aspect of women, gender equity, SMEs, and support for war veterans. Government is committed to empower the marginalized sections of society, including women and small to medium-scale enterprises, SMEs. Hence, 188.1 billion Zimbabwe dollars has been allocated to the Ministry of Women's Affairs, Community, Small and Medium Enterprises, Development to implement empowerment initiatives, including the recapitalization of empowerment institutions such as Empower Bank, SMETCO, and Women's Development Fund. The 2024 national budget also allocates 221 billion to the Ministry of Veterans of the Liberation Struggle Affairs towards their monthly gratuities, medical benefits, funeral grants, school fees for their dependents, and then also to support a mop-up vetting exercise and the capacitation of provincial and district structures under the ministry. Let me turn to the issue of human capital development and well-being. Mr. Speaker, sir, interventions in core social services of education, health, as well as timely social protection for the vulnerable will ensure that every child has an opportunity to maximize its human potential, human capital potential, and contribution to society. On health, Mr. Speaker said the 2024 national budget seeks to consolidate recovery of public health sector services across all levels of healthcare through provision of requisite tools of trade such as adequate working space, manpower, drugs, medical supplies across the value chain. In this regard, an amount of 6.3 trillion Zimbabwe dollars has been allocated towards the Ministry of Health and Child Care. And again here, a footnote, Mr. Speaker said, we're always chasing the Abuja target. In this regard, I think we've worked very hard on it. Let me turn to the education sector. Mr. Speaker said, again I'm going to quote an economist called Gary Becker. He was awarded the 1992 Nobel Prize in Economics for what it's worth. He says that expenditure on education and skills development is an investment in human capital, which is a key driver of economic progress and social mobility. Looking at the primary and secondary education, therefore the 2024 national budget prioritizes provision of quality and easy access to education and other learning opportunities for children, which is central to the attainment of SDG number 4. In this regard, 8 trillion Zimbabwe dollars has been set aside for the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education for learning and as well materials as well as teacher capacitation at primary and secondary education levels. This includes resources for the procurement of sanitary wear for disadvantaged girls. Then on higher and tertiary education, Mr. Speaker, I propose to allocate 2.4 trillion to the Ministry of Higher and Tertiary Education, Innovation, Science and Technology Development to support implementation of Education 5.0, which promotes a knowledge-driven economy that is sustained by innovation, industrialization, and modernization. Mr. Speaker, a footnote, both these allocations for primary and secondary education and for higher and tertiary education, we add those up together, you'll find that they are way beyond the 20% target which has been set through the Dakar agreements, which says that no less than 20% of the budget in Africa should be allocated to this sector. Let me turn to the skills audit aspect. Mr. Speaker, sir, an amount of 43 billion has been allocated to the Ministry of Skills Audit and Development for undertaking national skills audit that seeks to identify existing human capital gaps that need to be addressed. The audit will also attempt to identify the skills for the future, especially in areas such as generative artificial intelligence, AI, as well as areas of potential national comparative advantage. I now turn to social protection. In line with the NDS 1 theme of leaving no one and no place behind, provision of decent, inclusive and sustainable social protection services remains a priority for government, targeting vulnerable groups. This could be the disabled, children, the elderly and so forth. In this regard, a budget of 2.4 trillion Zimbabwe dollars has been set aside for the Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare to implement social protection programs such as the Basic Education Assistance Module, BEAM, Harmonized Cash Transfer Programs, as well as the Food Deficit Mitigation Program, Health Assistance, Child Protection Services to support the elderly and persons with disabilities. I now turn to effective institution building and governance, which is also a priority of this budget. Mr. Speaker, sir, successful economic transformation hinges on effective institutions of governance, which promotes private sector development through a conducive economic environment. To facilitate legislative reforms, including the alignment of laws to the Constitution, the 2024 national budget has allocated 1.1 trillion Zimbabwe dollars to the Ministry of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. In addition, the government will continue to capacitate and reform critical institutions of governance in order to improve the doing business environment. Let me turn to state-owned enterprises reform. Mr. Speaker, sir, as part of the state enterprise reform agenda, the government is addressing the conflict of interest that arose from exercising both ownership and regulatory functions, which undermines progress on the implementation of critical reforms that are required to improve performance as well as achieve the national vision. The Mutapa Investment Fund, a sovereign wealth fund, was established to deal with this. The fund will therefore be expected to implement measures that will strengthen the targeted parastatals governance frameworks and ensure operational profitability of the state-owned enterprises. A word about national security, Mr. Speaker, sir. The security forces play an important role of protecting the country's territorial integrity, national interest, and sovereignty over land and airspace against both internal and external aggression. Peace is key to economic development. Therefore, an amount of 8.6 trillion Zimbabwe dollars has been allocated towards the security cluster to meet their remuneration, food rations, operational equipment, and the necessary infrastructure for the Ministry of Defense, Home Affairs, cultural heritage, prisons and correctional services, as well as special services. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the Tripartite Negotiating Forum. The Tripartite Negotiating Forum, TNF, is a statutory body established through the Tripartite Negotiating Forum Act of 2019. In this regard, resources have been set aside to meet employment, operations, and capital costs for an effective TNF secretariat. I now turn to oversight institutions. And the August House now should pay attention. Zimbabwe, as a constitutional democracy, values the importance of oversight institutions on the operations of the state and welfare of the general public. Turning to the Auditor General, to support the Office of the Auditor General's operational requirements, $117 billion has been provided for under this budget to cover employment costs, training and development of staff, digitization, as well as rehabilitation and upgrading of their office space. Now, turning to Parliament. Parliament plays an important role of legislation and oversight over the executive. Therefore, to support the functions of Parliament, $475.1 billion Zimbabwe dollars has been provided under the 2024 national budget for the day-to-day operations, for vehicles, for Constitutional Development Fund, a CDF, and other related equipment for both Parliament staff and honourable members of Parliament. Turning to the Public Service Commission. The Public Service Commission is central to the effective and efficient delivery of public services through recruitment and development of civil service personnel. To support the Commission to deliver on its mandate of providing, I'll retake that. To support the Commission to deliver on its mandate of providing a motivated and capable public service able to deliver quality public services, the budget has set aside 1.4 trillion Zimbabwe dollars to support interventions by the institution targeting ICT infrastructure, particularly the Human Resource Information Management System, pension system, payroll system, procurement of buses for the service,
and other major infrastructure projects. I now turn to other independent commissions which also have been allocated budgets. Judicial Services Commission, JSC, allocated 274 billion Zimbabwe dollars. Human Rights Commission, $42.1 billion. National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, 56 billion. National Prosecuting Authority, 98.3 billion. Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, 59.6 billion. Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, 116.6 billion. Zimbabwe Gender Commission, 53 billion. Zimbabwe Gender Commission, 48.5 billion, correction. Zimbabwe Land Commission, 53 billion, and the Zimbabwe Media Commission, 35 billion. A comment on devolution and decentralization, Mr. Speaker, sir. The 2024 national budget is allocated 2.7 trillion Zimbabwe dollars, or 5% of projected revenue, under the intergovernmental fiscal transfers to provinces to undertake local projects that improve provision of public services that reflect the needs of the communities in different regions and localities. Let me turn to the Ministry of Local Government. Local authorities play a pivotal role in service provision at local level, especially on restoring water supplies, fixing sewage systems, repairing roads, to complement central government and development partner efforts. An amount of 1.2 trillion Zimbabwe dollars has been set aside for the Ministry of Local Government and Public Works to spearhead development within communities. Furthermore, the National Council of Chiefs has been allocated 40 billion Zimbabwe dollars to enhance management and traditional leadership systems. I now turn finally to image building, engagement and re-engagement. Mr. Speaker, sir, government is making progress on engagement and re-engagement under the institutionalized structured dialogue platform to underpin the Zimbabwe's arrears clearance and debt resolution process. The allocation of 976 billion Zimbabwe dollars to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Trade is meant to advance image building, engagement and re-engagement. In addition, 122.4 billion Zimbabwe dollars has been set aside to the Ministry of Information, Publicity and Broadcasting Services in order for them to improve the country's image through robust information management and dissemination. That concludes the allocations in terms of votes that are proposed for the 2024 budget. Mr. Speaker, sir, I now turn to revenue measures. Mr. Speaker, sir, the measures that I'm presenting seek to provide relief to taxpayers, enhance the capacity of government to generate additional revenue, in particular from micro and small enterprises, the mining sector, as well as strengthen tax administration. Let me go straight into the tax relief measures, starting with income tax. Looking at the tax-free threshold, I propose to review the tax-free threshold to 750,000 Zimbabwe dollars per month, or 9 million Zimbabwe dollars per annum, and adjust the tax bands to end at $270 million per annum, above which the tax will be levied at a rate of 40%, and this is with effect from 1 January 2024. On the bonus tax-free threshold, I further propose to review the local currency tax-free bonus threshold from 500,000 Zimbabwe dollars to 7.5 million Zimbabwe dollars with effect from 1 November 2023. I now turn to withholding tax, focusing on small-scale and subsistence farmers. Mr. Speaker, in order to support smallholder and subsistence farmers in the grain to the Grain Marketing Board and other commercial players, I propose to review the tax-exempt threshold on withholding tax on agricultural commodities that include soybeans, sunflower, groundnuts, cottonseed from $1,000 per annum to $5,000 per annum
or this local currency equivalent. Let me turn to the suspension of duty on motor vehicles that are imported by safari and tour operators. In order to allow the tourism sector to fully recuperate, I propose to renew the suspension of duty on new motor vehicles imported by safari and tour operators for a further 2 years, beginning 1 January 2024. Mr. Speaker, so that was a summary of some of the tax relief measures. There is more in the thicker statement. Let me turn to revenue enhancing measures, starting with the taxation of micro and small enterprises. There's an urgent issue regarding the licensing of traders, Mr. Speaker said. In order to restore the supply chain from the manufacturer, wholesaler to retailer, I propose that only licensed and tax-compliant operators procure goods from manufacturers and wholesalers. In addition, I therefore propose that only traders registered for VAT purposes and in possession of a valid tax clearance certificate be eligible to procure goods from manufacturers. I now turn to VAT registration thresholds. I further propose to review downwards the VAT registration threshold to $25,000 or its local currency equivalent with effect from 1 January 2024. Enterprises that meet the above threshold should thus register and account for VAT, failure of which applicable penalties will be invoked. I now turn to something new, Mr. Speaker said. It's called the minimum domestic top-up tax, which seeks to foster a fair and effective tax system across the entire world. Mr. Speaker said, the domestic minimum top-up tax, DMTT, is part of the global rules which aim to ensure that global profits of large multinational enterprises are taxed at a minimum corporate income tax rate of 15%. Granting of generous tax incentives results in an effective tax rate of less than 15% for some of the multinationals. Under the global tax rules, where tax incentives results in an effective tax rate of less than 15%, the tax jurisdiction where the multinational is headquartered collects the difference between the effective tax under the tax incentive and the minimum effective tax rate of 15%. This is called the top-up tax. So the DMTT allows the country where the low tax profits arise from the tax incentive to collect the top-up tax rather than ceding tax rights to the headquarter jurisdiction of the multinational. The calculation of the DMTT will be based on the effective tax rate charged on the jurisdictional profits, not the jurisdiction's statutory corporate income tax. The DMTT only taxes the tax incentives to the same extent that the same income will be included in the headquarter country of the company, the multinational. I therefore propose to enact DMTT rules to guard against ceding tax rights to foreign jurisdictions on top-up tax arising from tax incentives that are provided to those investments. I now turn to the issue of surcharge on high-value vehicles. Mr. Speaker, and honorable members, will be aware that government in 2023 introduced a 30% surcharge on motor vehicles with a minimum free on board value of $120,000. This was aimed at enhancing the wealth redistributive function of taxes. There is thus scope to strengthen the concept in view of the volumes of high-value motor vehicles being imported. I therefore propose to expand the scope of the surcharge
with effect from 1 January 2024. I think we have on the screens in a minute, I hope they'll show it, that for vehicles with a value of between 120,000 to 300,000, the surcharge is 30%. From 301,000 to 700,000, it's 40%. And above 700,000, the surcharge is set at 50%. I now turn to mining tax revenue contribution. Let me deal with the capital gains tax and stamp duty first. Mr. Speaker, sir, I propose that all documents and agreements for the transfer or disposal or lease of mineral rights be lodged with the state for review and approval before a transaction is concluded. Often transactions, Mr. Speaker, say, takes place offshore without our knowledge as a country for millions of dollars, and we're not involved. I therefore, in addition, I propose that no transfer of mining rights shall be approved without payment of capital gains tax and stamp duty or any other tax due on the value of the transaction. Failure to abide by this condition shall render the disposal or lease of mining rights null and void. Let me come to the issue of sharing of revenue with the state on disposal of mineral rights. In view of the recent developments where mining rights are disposed of privately outside the country at sometimes astronomical prices, I propose that revenue derived therefrom be shared equally with the state. Furthermore, in order to enable government to track the movement of mining rights for tax purposes, I propose that a register of mining rights with a record of applications, grants, variations, dealings, assignments, transfers, suspensions, and cancellations of rights be maintained and accessible to the Zimbabwe Revenue Authority. I also propose that agreements for the transfer or disposal or lease of mining rights be lodged with the state and reviewed and approved before they are implemented. I now turn to mineral beneficiation, looking at lithium. Substantial mineral revenues can be generated from beneficiation of key minerals with a significant resource endowment of platinum, group of metals, the PGMs, gold, lithium, and diamonds. Economic transformation and development can be anchored on beneficiation. Within this context, any lithium value addition process that does not result in the production of lithium carbonate is not regarded as beneficiation, hence is liable to an export tax. Lithium producing companies should submit their beneficiation plans no later than 31 March 2024. Furthermore, no licenses shall be granted to a prospective lithium company without approval of a beneficiation plan. Let me turn to a related issue of corporate social responsibility. As a token of remembrance of the mountains, Mr. Speaker said, that nature offered, local communities should be provided with basic services that include water, healthcare, electricity and sanitation, among others. Development of mines thus present an opportunity to improve conditions within these communities. Hence, I propose to introduce a 1% levy on gross proceeds of lithium, black granite and other cut and uncut dimensional stones and quarry stones. These resources will go towards supporting such corporate social responsibility. Mr. Speaker, sir, I now turn to the issue of financing road infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, sir, in order to raise resources to finance road infrastructure, I propose to introduce the following measures. Let me start with the strategic reserve levy. I propose to review upwards the strategic reserve levy by 3 cents and 5 cents for diesel and petrol respectively, with effect from January 1, 2024. On toll fees, Mr. Speaker said, toll fees are currently pegged between $2 to $10 or local currency equivalent, depending on the type of vehicle. I therefore propose an upward review of toll fees on premium roads, that is Harare Bay Bridge and with the effect from 1 January 2024. Revenue derived from the increase will be remitted to the Consolidated Revenue Fund for the purpose of maintaining these roads. On passport and central vehicle registry fees, I further propose, Mr. Speaker, say that passport and selected fees charged by central vehicle registry be revised upwards with the effect from 1 January 2024. Additional revenue generated from the above measures will be ring-fenced, as I said earlier, towards road infrastructure development. Mr. Speaker, sir, I now turn to an issue of levy. This is a cancer equipment issue. It's a very important issue, Mr. Speaker, sir. A levy on sugar content on beverages. In response to the growing concerns on the adverse effects of consumption of sugar, in particular contained in beverages, tax on beverages has been implemented in a number of countries, including the SADC region. The consumption of high sugar content beverages is linked to increased risk of non-communicable diseases, NCDs. It is thus necessary to discourage consumption of high sugar content beverages. Hence, I propose to introduce a levy of 2 cents per gram of sugar contained in beverages, excluding water, with effect from 1 January 2024. The funds derived from this levy, Mr. Speaker, say, will be ring-fenced for therapy and procurement of cancer equipment for diagnosis. Mr. Speaker, sir, I now turn to yet another important matter, that of a wealth tax. Mr. Speaker, sir, the key fundamental of tax policy is to address regressivity of tax that occurs when individuals in a low-income category pay a higher percentage of their income as compared to individuals in higher income brackets. Consequently, the tax incidences fall disproportionately on the low-income groups, resulting in inequality. In order to ensure that every person contributes to the fiscus in line with their levels of income, I propose to introduce a wealth tax levied at a rate of 1% of the market values of residential properties with a minimum value of $100,000. Resources derived from the levy will be ring-fenced towards urban infrastructure development, in particular roads, water, sewage, and community health centers. Principal private residential properties owned by elderly persons above 70 years will, however, be exempt from this tax. I now turn to excise duty, a proposal for the introduction of a digital platform to monitor goods for purposes of collecting excise duty. Mr. Speaker, sir, the growth of illicit trade, in particular in cigarettes, has increased contraband cigarettes produced in legally registered factories under registered brands, thereby decelerating the growth of revenue to the fiscus. A digital platform that provides real-time, traceable, and authentic data on locally produced excisable products would thus be beneficial to the fiscus. Government will thus explore implementation of a digital platform on locally produced goods, particularly cigarettes. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, the challenge before us is to consolidate economic transformation already underway to ensure that benefits accrue to every Zimbabwean in line with the spirit of leaving no one and no place behind. Change is inevitable, but transformation is a choice. So said Heather Ash Amara. Therefore, while we celebrate the successes recorded so far, there's still a lot of work ahead of us to consciously implement transformational economic policies which have a positive impact on the majority of citizens, especially the poor and the marginalized societies. The desired economic transformation is a responsibility of all stakeholders, especially the government, businesses, labor, and with each playing their critical role. On its part, the government is prepared to fully play its role of providing an enabling environment through ease of doing business reforms, investment in public infrastructure, and provision of effective public institutions. Mr. Speaker, sir, I finally commend the 2024 national budget to this august House in compliance with the law, and it is accompanied by the following documents. Yes, there's the 2024 national budget statement, there's the 2024 infrastructure investment plan, there's the 2024 citizens budget, we have the estimates of expenditure, otherwise known as the Blue Book, we have the gender responsive budget statement, the finance bill, the appropriation bill, the statement of public debt, and the NDS1 midterm review. I thank you. Dinotenda Nyabonga Twalumbwa.
May the Honorable Minister table the presentation at the clerk's table. Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, if we can all rise for His Excellency to lead.
You have it, Zimbabwe's 2024 national budget presentation. Now, my number was 44 trillion. Wow, was I not just wrong? Was the number $58.2 trillion? That's a huge number, the budget. And as we said before, the breather, before the minister's presentation, it was the expected ministries, the expected sectors that we saw the money going to. We discussed this earlier. Here you're looking at agriculture, $4.3 trillion. Of course, education, both primary and higher education, almost $10.4 trillion. Social protection, $2.4 trillion. So you can see that, quite frankly, health, of course, health was a big one as well. Health, $6.3 trillion. So we knew that the money was going to go to those ministries that obviously will look after the Zimbabwean people. Of course, we will also talk about what he gave and what he took away. He gave and he took away. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, let's get my guest views. Of course, I'm here joined by Tatenda Nyachega, CEO Africa Roundtable, Prosper Chitambara, and of course Marvin Chidzonga. And I will be joined just now by Esther Mapungwana, and who was left there? It's obviously the Komorera Sibanda. Let me start with you, Tatenda. Interesting. I mean, then again, you were the one that said you weren't expecting much, right? So did you get much?
Thank you, Ed. Reflecting from it, I think it sums up our environment, just like we're highlighting. Last year we were talking about 4.5 trillion, and now we're talking of 58.2 trillion. And that, to me, that tells you in terms of the environment, the inflationary environment that we're operating in, and it doesn't necessarily mean a lot, because we need to do the metrics or the calculations around the capital expenditure and the recurrent, what's going towards the administration, what's going towards the
programs
the programs and so on. But in terms of taking the economy up towards the middle income as we have envisioned in Vision 2030, will require us maybe having more of capital investment, or maybe our budget speaking to the capital investment, or being more aligned to the capital aspect.
Mining, I mean, I heard him pitch that capacity utilization would average 60% next year. He gave, 130.5 billion to Ministry of Industry. Look, Ministry of Industry isn't really like a health or education ministry. They're there to facilitate, put in place policy. But still, when you look at this budget, I mean, you would hope that you would see, I wouldn't call it a pro-business, but with African Continental Free Trade Area coming along, you'd hope there'd be something in there that really would speak to economic exports, to really boosting our economy. A quick comment on that, because you're obviously the CEO's roundtable.
Sure. I think when we reflect on it, you see that it's actually more silent in terms of the ease of doing business, addressing the issues that are there to do with promoting an environment which will actually increase or enhance that business is expanding or growing. And of late, yes, we can talk about the 60% as reported in terms of the capacity utilization. But to be honest, I'm sure you'd talk of an actually expanding corporate graveyard. We've got a lot of companies which are actually closing down, a lot of companies which are, yes. So that element of resuscitation, the budget is silent in terms of expanding or addressing those issues.
Prosper, from what you spoke about before when we asked you your expectations, well, they met. I mean, let's talk about the funding side. We'll get to the revenue just now. I'm not sure, like, for example, I just pick a few things. Transport, 1.2 trillion. I suppose a lot of that's going to National Rails of Zimbabwe. That's going to be an interesting one. Energy, 90 billion. That's not exactly a lot of money when we're talking about a energy problem that we have, which is affecting business. Talk to me. What did you see?
Well, like we said earlier on, that there weren't many changes in terms of the structure of the budget itself. But my view is that the minister has been very audacious in terms of coming up with these new revenue generation measures. We've seen the minister introducing a sugar tax. Of course, some of us have been advocating for that, given the growing disease burden, especially around NCDs. We've also seen the wealth tax, for example, 1% tax on properties worth valued at 100,000.
That's not exactly a lot. I mean, if you had said 1 million, maybe 100,000 is pretty much a normal house in any suburb. So therefore, we're all going to be paying taxes.
In medium density.
So what we say? Are we all going to be paying taxes if we own a house of 100,000?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So that's why I said he's giving and he's taking away. What else did you spot?
And other levies, the corporate social responsibility levy on the lithium and
that I don't have an issue with. I think the issue of beneficiation. I think that's noble. But then again, you know what? There's holes in this budget. Let me just finish with you here, Prosper. There's holes. For example, we talk about 2.3 million people requiring housing.
By
2025, right? How much? 353 billion.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So that implies that a lot of the funding for housing infrastructure is going to be shared in PPPs or with private. He hopes the private sector is going to come in.
Because already we knew the private sector, I think, was bearing a disproportionate burden in terms of that. And I'm sure that's going to continue because what's been allocated, obviously, is not sufficient given the demands and the requirements.
Marvin, one thing I did like, and then again, we live in the capital of Ireland, so we all know about the water problems that we have here. I like the fact that he was putting, I mean, look, it's not a lot, but it's enough, 683 billion, water sanitation, looking at infrastructure for new dams, to improve sanitary services, because obviously we need water, we have sewage problems, etc., particularly in the capital. I'm sure it probably extends to most cities around the country. That seemed positive. But there were also negatives, weren't they?
Yeah. If you look at maybe what has been happening for the year, a lot of construction activity has been taking place, largely funded by the government. But like we highlighted, it was not coming from a sustainable source of funding, which is maybe current revenue. Having to look at maybe the creation of bonds, maybe whether municipal bonds or government bonds for the construction of dams, it's not easy. It's not easy because we've got shallow capital markets locally. Then also in terms of our country risk, for us to be able to access that kind of capital on the international market, it's not going to be easy. But until then, I think before we can look at maybe really, sweating the assets, sort of maybe creating more assets, we need to start sweating the already existing assets that we've
Which
built.
hopefully he'll identify in Mutapa with a bit of luck, because he said that he doesn't know the government's assets, which is an interesting thing for Minister
So we
of Finance
need to
say.
be able to sweat the assets before we can call upon maybe for the creation of more dams, more of these sewer systems and stuff.
Yeah.
So before we have truly exhausted maybe the capacity of say Toko Mkosi, I think we run the risk of creating white elephants, which are not being fully utilized for irrigation purposes. So until it's a certain time that we can say, look, a lot of these irrigation facility or dams are being utilized at 100%. That's when maybe we would say, looking at the government and other stakeholders have to come back and really look at construction.
I must be honest. I know we said that the minister has to balance, and depends on what glasses you have on and what segment of society you're representing. I'll give you an example. If you're in the women activists, for example, 188.1 billion isn't a lot of money. When you think that includes salaries and wages for the ministry, then you've got to talk the Women's Bank, which is already underfunded and undercapitalized. So 188.1 billion for women, if I can put it that way, isn't a lot. You look at other sectors, you look at by the way, those of you who love football, hopefully we'll get a new stadium, or at least refurbish the old stadiums.
If I could comment, and I think the stance that has been taken by our minister here, it's not really much about maybe stretching maybe the budget.
No,
it's a bit of a hawkish stance, where the government said, look, we don't want to overstretch ourselves. There's so many negative effects that could have happened if they were to maybe really overstretch. One, we have a huge deficit in terms of maybe our budget deficit. But having said that, if we also stretched too far, we will not only have a huge deficit,
it is
we also
another
have
thing.
exchange rate
Consolidating economic transformation. So I see your point. It speaks to the theme.
It speaks to the theme. Because if we are going to do that when we don't have so many funders outside of maybe...
All right, look, I'll tell you what, we're going to get a few comments. We're going to come to Eben Mabunda at Mount Hamlin at Parliament, just to get some reactions. Eben, obviously the budget's come and gone. We're looking at what, over $58.2 trillion budget. I'm sure you're talking to a few of the august members. What feedback are you getting there in Mount Hampden?
Mr. Housing. I don't think it's been very decent, I must say. Of course, you know that people always want more. But given where we were in 2023 and where we are now, we are able to
Now, that's obviously Minister of Housing Daniel Galway. Now, he, of course, at the forefront of ensuring that there's housing for all and everybody has access to housing. He was given what?
Those houses.
Yeah, and of course, the moment he builds them, they'll be taxed by. But he gets 353 billion again.
It's administrative.
Yes, it's admin, yeah. And in fact, you know what was interesting? Did he give a number on the salaries and wages? No, he didn't, did he? Last year it was 52.4%. He didn't give a figure, did he?
He didn't.
That was interesting. Wasn't that interesting? Because that is a defining number, that.
Oh, it is. It is. Yeah.
Huh.
I think what it did, it didn't really consolidate the number.
No, he put it into each ministry.
He only did for the capex. For the capex, he said it's about 10 trillion.
That's right.
Yeah, which is about 70%.
So, looking at your CEO, like you CEO round table, I mean, obviously the CEOs have the needs. They want the macroeconomic stability. They want the exchange rate. I mean, I didn't get the impression that he was coming up with this exchange rate policy to say like these policies, the way we're spending this budget is going to at least hopefully keep the exchange rate stable, try and rein in inflation. I still think that's the Achilles in the room, the elephant in the room, so to speak.
Sure. Looking at it from the presentation, it doesn't give an outright direction in terms of how he's going to manage, or maybe how we are going to manage the exchange rate, and how I heard of some figures around inflation.
He said 3% per month on month. Reserve Bank is committed to doing that. But look, let's be honest. The last two budgets, he's hit us on an inflation number, and it's just hasn't worked. Last year was what double digits by now. Yeah,
so you would see these are just figures which are just being thrown around, but to check on or maybe to speak on the reality of it, you discover that we still have got a lot of work to do around financial sector stability. Yes, in as much as I was talking about, there is stability, but on reality, yeah, on the ground there's still a lot of work to be done.
Right now, then we're gonna take a quick breather because I want to bring in my other two guests, that's Esther Mapungwana and Zikowe Sibanda, because I'd like to hear Esther's views, because remember we spoke to her before when we were doing our pre-budget about women, youth, people with disabilities. It's nice to see what she says, and also, of course, the big one, which is really critical, which is social protection. You, of course, are watching ZTM Prime's exclusive National Budget 2024 presentation, which has just ended, just finished now, Mount Hampden Parliament by the Minister of Finance, Professor Ngube. Don't go away. Our continuing coverage will continue going after the break.
Happiness is upon us at OK Stores. Get your 2 kg Cookmore white rice for just $2.50. 1 liter Denderi Citro for just 90 cents. 2 kg Surf washing powder at $4.10. 8-inch Christmas fruitcake for just $28. 1.25 liter Chibuku for just 95 cents. Christmas is here. Kisimusi yashika. Ikisimusi isifikile. OK, my happy place. Christmas is here in all Bon Marché stores. We have the best selection of all your grocery needs and occasions this Christmas. Get your 1 kg Farmer J's drumsticks for $4.50. Omo auto washing powder 2 kg $8. Glazed Christmas ham 100 grams for 50 cents. Heineken Lager Silver NRB 330 ml for just $1.50. KWV Classic Chenin Blanc 750 ml for just $8. Christmas is here. Bon Marché. Simply good. Christmas is here. Buy bulk and save this Christmas at OK Mart. Get your 10 by 2 kg Azam self-raising flour for just $19.80. 6 by 1 liter Life UHT milk for just $7.30. 25 by 750 ml Sunlight dishwashing liquid for just $79.50. Bulk Super 4-quarter for just $5.60 per kg. 10 kg pocket of potatoes for just $7.90 each. 6 by 1.25 liter Nyati sorghum beer for just $4. Christmas is here. Kisimusi yashika. Ikisimusi isifikile. OK Mart, my happy place.
Back, you're watching The Mint, and this is TM Prime. I'm Andy Hodges. This is our continuing coverage of the 2024 National Budget presentation, which is just finished. Now, our reporter, Iwan Mabunda, is actually on the ground at Mount Hamden, and he's managed to get a couple of ministers to get their views, because, of course, it's these ministers who will get the allocation. So they're going to know, are you disappointed? Are you happy? Can the money that you're given actually satisfy the programs that you want to have in 2024? Let's see what Iwan Mabunda has picked up and who he's speaking to there.
In terms of how the tax regime will be. Key elements that we saw being introduced by the minister, the revision in terms of the toll fees. This one will be taking a bite from the motorists, an increase in terms of the fuel levy by 3 cents. These are expected to have an effect in terms of the overall economy, particularly from a revenue collection. I also want to make reference to the wealth tax that was introduced for properties that are worth over 100,000 United States dollars, that will be expected to be contributing 1% per annum in a bid, of course, to bridge the wealth inequality that we have got within the confines of Zimbabwe. Now, speaking to the informal sector of the economy, the minister there said that it will be mandatory for a business to be registered. It will be mandatory for a business to have a tax registration facility where particularly the accessing of goods from manufacturers as well as key suppliers in Zimbabwe, but also even beyond our borders, that of course coming through from the Chief of Treasury where that is concerned. Now, to speak to the lithium sector, which has become the buzzword for the Zimbabwean economy, there are indications that we will see the coming in of key reforms, particularly where beneficiation is concerned. The minister there saying that government has taken an approach, or is proposing an approach, that all lithium producers in Zimbabwe must produce to the extent of lithium carbonate concentrates in that particular regard. And of course, now we're joined by the Chief of Treasury in the capacity of the Minister of Finance, Economic Development, as well as Investment Promotion, Honorable Mutuli Ncube. Sir, a very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, indeed.
Fantastic. Now let's talk about some of the key aspects from the budget, just as an overview in terms of the thrust, and of course with the theme that you alluded to in your presentation.
The budget is still based on the principle that we should try by all means to live within our means, because Zimbabwe doesn't have many opportunities, unlike other countries, to borrow, to get additional loans here and there. We don't have that opportunity. So we have to live within our means. We're projecting a deficit of 1.5% of GDP. That's really the bottom line. On the back of economic growth next year of 3.5%. We're expecting El Nino. The rains are not behaving well. That will impact our agriculture, especially the maize output. So therefore, budget is living within those means. But also the budget is a balanced budget. It is an inclusive budget. It tries to leave no one behind, and indeed no place behind, in the sense that for those who are in the low-income bracket, we have increased the threshold in terms of the tax-free threshold, so they don't pay taxes up to a certain level. I think that's the right way to go. And then for those with ways and means, we've introduced a wealth tax, so that again, this is distributive. It will transfer resources to those who are less, or the lower levels of the income bracket, but also enable government to intervene on critical infrastructure in urban areas. Let's look at the sewage system, for instance. Almost in every urban area, there are issues. Right now, we have a cholera issue. That's a sewage problem, a problem with clean water, right? Look at the roads, the potholes. Where does government get that money? So we needed to do this to provide critical infrastructure, introduce a wealth tax, as well as balance out and redistribute some of the taxes. Right. Of course, we've raised taxes on some premium, what we consider to be premium roads, such as the Beitbridge-Harare Road and so forth. So that again, to maintain that beautiful road, we need extra revenue. We also put up a premium on these high-value cars and so forth. It's not a lot, frankly. I think it's affordable. So we've really tried to balance. And in the area of, for instance, lithium, we want more beneficiation so that local Zimbabweans, the citizens, can benefit
from their natural resources. Value addition is what we're pushing for. That's what the budget tried to do.
Right. The biggest winners, I would put it, of course, we're Minister of Education, 10.4 trillion, infrastructure, 10 trillion. Let's speak to the education as well as, of course, Zimbabwe having met the Dakar declaration, to put it that way.
Well, we were pleased that we were able to maintain the high allocation for the education sector overall in line with the Dakar principle. This is important, because investment in education is actually investment. It's not just acquiring education. It's actually investment in human capital for the development of the country. This is critical to improve the quality of the learning environment, the capacity of the teachers, more schools, and so forth. ICT, all that is required. We can never build enough schools. We have to keep building more schools, especially boarding schools in the rural areas, so the rural child is not left behind. An issue, for instance, of sanitary wear for the disadvantaged girls, especially in rural areas, is critical. So the budget is catering for that. I think we've done very well. When you look at the higher education sector, innovation is very, very critical. Science and science, what called the STEMs aspect, is very critical. So supporting innovation hubs in our universities is critical, and there's a sizable budget towards that, where we are turning our intellectual property from these research into goods and services. Already you are seeing the examples everywhere, and want to do more in extending resources so that some of these ideas can be fully commercialized. So you will see, again, a close working relationship between our National Venture Fund project and these innovation hubs under the Ministry of Higher Education. So we believe that sector has been received adequate attention in this budget.
And lastly, of course, your operations are closely linked to those of the central bank. Now, there was a recommendation from the central bank to get rid of the 10% yardstick or benchmark or cap on the interbank. How do you intend to navigate that particular subject from this point?
Look, the central bank does many things. As an institution that is meant to contribute to monetary stability and the soundness of the financial system. Our financial system is sound. The central bank is doing a good job at that. You mentioned the 10% margin that or limit that has been set. It's a policy. So policies are always reviewed from time to time. I'd want to speak to that specific policy. It is the policy now. And again, we're happy to receive any ideas or recommendations as to how we can smooth volatility or have instruments in place for smoothing the volatility of our currency whenever it overshoots, smooth the volatility or overshooting in our prices in the shops. It was really, that rule was really meant to deal with that. So if there are other options, let's hear them out. We just want to protect citizens. It's not for the government. It's to protect citizens from this up and down volatility in prices and in the exchange rate. That's all.
Right, Minister, thank you very much for talking to ZTN.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Much appreciated. Of course, that was the Minister of Finance, Economic Development, as well as Investment Promotion, engaging, of course, with ZTN on some of the key aspects where the 2024 national budget was actually concerned. And, of course, he rehashed some of the tax reforms that have been brought to the table, particularly where the tax for the citizens is actually concerned, of course, in a bid to move in line with inflation as some of the trends that we have seen playing out. But of course, just to rehash some of the aspects that we talked about, 3.5% GDP, that's been indicated, and of course much to look forward to and much to decipher. And as far as the 2024 budget is actually concerned, well, that's a wrap from the team here at the new Parliament building. Back to you, Andy Hodges.
Conversation there that he had with Zimbabwe's Minister of Finance. Now, Esther, I've got you. I asked you this question. Looking at the budget now from the lens, I mean, you're the Zimbabwe Women's Resource Center and Network. Okay, looking at it from the lens of that, of women, looking at the lens of social welfare protection, looking at it from a youth perspective, looking at it from that angle, yeah? What are you seeing? Because some of the numbers, I don't know. I mean, I understand the minister has to balance, but I don't know. I would have probably hoped for a bit more for women's affairs would have been a great number. Capacitating the Women's Bank would have been good. Putting in some more grants or funding for youth would have been a good way to boost entrepreneurs and so on. But anyway, what do you think?
Okay, I think that the minister, in his presentation, as he alluded to, he tried to balance. However, it's not enough in terms of the contributions that you're talking about. According to the budget, we see that almost 0.3% has been allocated to the women, the Ministry of Women, and like you said, you also have to have the funds that are going to be put in for grants and loans to the Women's Bank from that same budget, as well as the activities that are supposed to go there. So, in terms of what the women want to achieve, it will really not be enough. And if we look at the social protection, there's been an improvement in terms of the figures, in terms of the percentages. It's 2.3 trillion, which is almost about 4.1% from the previous, almost 1% from last year. But in terms of the value for money, unfortunately, it's something that is still far from what Zimbabwe really needs. However, we should commend also issues like the sugar tax that Prosper also alluded to, where it's supposed to go to cancer, I think, services.
Yeah, that's what
is indicated.
So I like the way he ring fenced it. That was good, yeah. But when you look at social protection, you're talking about 2.4 trillion. Again, you know, there is so many of our citizens that are below the poverty line that need help. And I know that you can put, you see, and this is where I think we need to be a bit careful, because when you talk social protection, 2.4 trillion, then you must also then go to agriculture and look at where's the money going from Vudza, because that also is a form of it, which is free inputs. Then you have to go look at the other sector and say health. Now, possibly you've got BEAM, that's free education, okay, and so on and so forth. So if you look across different line ministries, there are various avenues for those less privileged than most.
Yes, I think like what he alluded to, if you look at the agriculture, I think just contribution was about 4-point-something trillion, but he did not. We were not sure about the smallholder farmers, because those are the chunk. That's the most where most people are, most women are, most survivors are getting their food from, and also the food deficit that is also that is forecasted because of the drought is also was not really mentioned. How are we going to actually curb around that? Then there's need for finances, because there's a forecast around those things. So the budget really, in terms of the value for money, I still believe that it still falls short.
Siko, let's look at the revenue side. Okay, so of course the one thing that everyone looks for as workers is the bans moving, the income tax bans, tax-free shares of put up. I mean, okay, it's there, but I honestly, okay, when I look at this, to be frank, it looks like he gave me something, but as I said, he's taken away a lot more if I have the other things. So if I have the house of 100,000, boom. If I have, I could, for example, expand the vehicle surcharge. If I have that, boom. And so on. We could go on and on and on. The petrol levy, of course, that means 1st of January, petrol's going to go up as he takes more money. If you like sugary drinks, levy's going to go up. Wealth tax, as I said, property. So what do you think of the revenue enhancing measures? He tried to be imaginative, but what about looking at it from a citizen, an individual citizen's perspective? Good or bad, winner or loser?
To me, overall, this is actually a lose for the citizen. Why am I saying so? Because and look at most of the proposed measures. I think it's about tax increases. But what I was expecting is that you're saying, because the economy is now more than 80% dollarized, and you all know that the informal sector is a hard-to-take sector, right? So I was expecting the budget statement to actually address how are we going to address the issues to do with informality. It's not always about raising taxes, because look, if you increase toll fees, what will happen to the transport along those premium roads? The burden comes back to the passenger. So to me, I was
just get more money rather than raise more money.
Exactly. So I was expecting revenue enhancement measures which does not increase taxes for the average person. For instance, as I indicated earlier, maybe how are we going to address informality? And we know that we are going into 2024 and the outlook is not bad. It's not good. Obviously, informality is going to increase. Maybe from the current estimate of 70% to 80%, because now it's a cash dollarized economy. So, to me, I was expecting to say, yes, in as much as the budget is of 58
So, okay,
trillion.
so you don't, okay, his argument is that if he can get someone else to squeal, if I can call it that, on these illegal guys, it works. So therefore, he's saying, if you want to buy from me as a manufacturer, okay, whatever you want to buy, I will not sell to you until you come with your memo, with your license, with your whatever. But anyway, hang on to that thought. I want you to answer that question, because he's kind of passing the buck, which is kind of in a way sad, because you'd hopefully that your tax people would find them, your regulatory people would find them. But anyway, I'll come back and ask that question. Now, you're watching The Mint, and this is ATM Prime, and of course, this is our continuing coverage of the 2024 National Budget Presentation. What's the figure? The magic figure was $58.2 trillion budget. Don't go away, The Mint. We'll be right back.
Is upon us at OK Stores. Get your 2 kg Cookmore white rice for just $2.50. 1 liter Denderi Citro for just 90 cents. 2 kg Surf washing powder at $4.10. 8-inch Christmas fruitcake for just $28. 1.25 liter Chibuku for just 95 cents. Christmas is here. Kisimusi yashika. Ikisimusi isifikile. OK, my happy place. Christmas is here in all Bon Marché stores. We have the best selection of all your grocery needs and occasions this Christmas. Get your 1 kg Farmer J's drumsticks for $4.50. Omo auto washing powder 2 kg $8. Glazed Christmas ham 100 grams for 50 cents. Heineken Lager Silver NRB 330 ml for just $1.50. KWV Classic Chenin Blanc 750 ml for just $8. Christmas is here. Bon Marché. Simply good.
Welcome back. You're watching The Mint, and this is ATM Prime. This is our continuing coverage of the Zimbabwe National 2024 Budget Presentation, done right now. It's just ended about half an hour ago, done by the Minister of Finance, Professor Ntuli Ngube. Let's talk about this. His idea that he could, in a way, maybe encourage non-registered companies to start registering, because they're saying, look, if I can buy off you, if you can't buy off a big company, if you don't have a tax evident license, then it force you, in a way, force you to get registered, become legal, then you can operate a business. But that isn't what it's like on the ground, is it?
Yeah. And I think on that measure, and let's look recently the Treasury PEMSEC commented on the issues to do with tax shops. And we all know where tax shops are getting most of their stuff. And I think...
from outside the country.
They are being smuggled outside the country.
Smuggled
I'm not seeing any measures in terms of strengthening our ports of entry and exit so that we try to curb smuggling of those commodities. So to me, going to see continued influx of these commodities in tax shops, this measure to me is not going to deter any informal activities.
All right, Esther, let's look at energy, because that is a big issue. It's a big issue for citizens as well as business. And I'd like you to comment as well, Tatenda. And I mean, 19.1 billion, that doesn't show an energy rollout program, does it? That's kind of like hey, we've got what we've got, at least for the next year, that's it.
Yes, and you would see that it actually have an effect on women and children, because we'll now, and the environment, people will now move to going back to cut trees to get their, to cook and to get their sources of energy. So in terms of allocation around the energy sector, especially for electricity, is something that should have been critically looked at, especially in the effect of the energy sources for
I think they're probably
people.
looking at debt. I think it's probably the way he's thinking about it. He's thinking that we need to fund, like Batoka, you have to do it by debt. I mean, that's what, $5 billion? I mean, there's no way we can raise that domestically. But this power thing is a big deal for business, doesn't it?
Definitely. And when you talk of businesses and you look at energy, sometimes when you just do a survey around the corporate world, you discover that energy it's a key source in terms of or a key input in terms of production. So that allocation that doesn't speak to our situation or to the environment that we're experiencing. If you go around Harare, we're talking of Harare and maybe in other cities as well, electricity is actually a nightmare or a challenge to most people. Then to add on to that, then you are saying besides having a better piece of the budget, speaking to the issues of resolving energy challenges that we are facing, then we are actually increasing 2%, 2 cents, 3 cents on petrol and diesel, which will actually, because once we don't have electricity, then it means the alternative for businesses is that they are actually running generators on diesel or on petrol. But the same petrol actually have got a 2%, 2 cents an increase. Then that speaks to the business environment. That will definitely have a negative impact in terms of the environment that businesses are operating in. And just like I alluded to previously, we are likely to see more in terms of companies going on the downside, or maybe increasing the graveyard, what I would refer to as the corporate graveyard, where companies are actually going out of business. Why? Because the environment is not allowing them to operate well. So I think it's an area that if the minister is to revisit it, then it needs attention.
Right now, we've got just a couple more minutes left. I wanted to give you all just an opportunity to sum up, and as we got to start with you, just sum up your thoughts on the 2024 budget. I mean, I think, if I could say this, a consensus is, I don't know, what would you call it, standstill budget? Is that the way of putting it? Consolidating. That's what the theme said, right? Consolidating. So let's go with that. Consolidating budget. Minister, we'll go with your words. Give me just a quick update on what your, just a wrap up of what you think about the budget.
I think the budget is actually, the minister has admitted that we are going to face tough times next year. Because he highlighted if you see all the budget assumptions, the adverse, look on commodity prices.
And the exchange rate, yeah, but why does he keep the exchange rate pretty standard? Have you noticed that? The exchange rate is pretty...
And also the budget is actually also assuming, year in, year out, we assume stable local currency. But
exactly.
Look right now, the current statistics, inflation statistics are showing that in September, inflation month-on-month was 1%. We move on to 2.5%. Now, in November, it's 4.5%. You see the trend.
So already there's pressure.
And then the budget, you have the budget which is actually saying stable inflation, stable exchange rate. That's the same mentality with the previous budget. So, to me, unless we address the issues to do with our currency, as well as issues to do with over-taxation of economic agents, I don't think this budget is going to transform the welfare of the people, as well as profitability of business.
Well, I mean, at least the minister was honest and didn't call it the transformative budget. He called it the consolidative budget. Esther, your final word?
My comments are really on the revenue collection measures that have been introduced, especially the wealth revenue and the sugar taxes and all the taxes. My issue is that if it's additional revenue, we want to see where it's going to go. We want to see how it's going to impact and how it's going to also actually go and feed into the deficit of the needs that are needed.
I do like the way you think. She's not worrying about the money. She's saying, how are they going to spend it and on what?
Yes, because the money is there. Because what we want, exactly,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, that is what matters. Because we want to see it on the ground.
Yeah.
The little that is there, let's see the results.
Yes.
That's my
we should,
comment.
we should use it as effectively as possible.
Yes.
Satenda, your final word?
All right. So looking at this budget, I've been calculating 58.2 trillion. That's about 53%, close to 53% in terms of what the ministries have been requiring from the treasury.
Yeah.
And of this 53%, the next question will be on disbursement. If you do the post-analysis, let's go end of 2023, from what they've been allocated, the disbursement, if it been done in time, you see that...
Let me speak on the minister's defense. I asked him that specific question. He said they've actually given more than 100% to every ministry. They've even had to give them supplementary money from the additional income they raised because of the exchange rate. So according to him, there's not a single ministry, including devolution funds, that has not been paid for.
Mostly...
Even though the minister said they haven't.
Yeah,
That's another story.
It will come out that way. But if you go to the ministries, they will
they
tell
say
you
they
that
haven't.
they will give you otherwise.
That's a fact, yeah.
So that's one challenge, to say, okay, this is what you've got. But the question is, let's have timely disbursement of those funds. Then the last component or the last aspect is, when you talk of these budgets, it's either you need to stimulate demand. How do you stimulate demand? You need to empower the consumers. And in this case, I think you are talking of giving, and on the other end, you are also taking away from the same consumers.
Okay.
So I think those are the issues that going into 2024, you are expecting the corporate world, or expecting the economy to actually face challenges.
I
in terms
also,
of
and I
production
think
and
the
demand.
numbers worldwide are not looking good. I think commodity prices are down. I think our exports, you saw our export numbers, imports are going to go up. He even admitted that. Our growth rate is down compared to 2023. So anyway, well, that's it. We've come into the end of our 2024 national budget presentation coverage. I'd like to thank Tatenda Nyachega, CEO, Africa Roundtable, Esther Mapungwana, Zimbabwe Women's Resource Center and Network, ZWRCN, Prosper Chitambaru, who's left us, unfortunately, the economist, Zikomo Sibanda from ZimCod, Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development, and last but not least, Marvin Chizonga, an investment analyst. Thank you very much for coming on this exclusive coverage of the budget presentation. Well, there you have it, 58.2 billion. The usual suspects got the money. Agriculture, 4.3 trillion. Transport, 1.2 trillion. And I could go on, but obviously education, $10 trillion. Well, that's it. We'll obviously be talking more about it. The Chase this evening, 9 p.m. Take care. I'm Andy Hodges. Goodbye, and please, you all be safe.